Hey everyone, Josh here. So after a long break of snowmobiling this winter, we're back at fixing TDIs. So I've broken enough snowmobiles and have to fix them this winter, so it's nice to be back at the TDIs. So I figured may as well start off with a big one. So 2015 Jetta TDI, so CVCA, the EA288 engine. We've got some after treatment issues, so the DPF, EGR, and SCR are coming out for repairs. I've already went over, if you're removing the components, you know they're illegal, so this video is removal to repair them, to reinstall them. We're not deleting. So 2015's 1 year only here in North America, so they're not as fun to do as the older cars, but I'm doing a video to figure out how. Okay, so up top we got a fair few items we have to take apart here before we go underneath. So we're going to start off, we got the def injector here. Inverted Torx down at the bottom here, holds the clamp on, holds that on. You got a def line. We got two coolant lines, and then the plug up here. Get that out of the way. These two differential sensors that always break when you're too aggressive and you don't know what you're doing during a timing belt change, they can come out of here. So we got a steel hard line that goes down there somewhere. We'll make a bit more room so we can see. We got this one line that runs up and over. So we're gonna have some O2 sensors, probably a NOx sensor, some EGT sensors, just a bunch of wiring we're gonna undo, get it out of here, that way that we don't risk breaking the sensor. Also gives you a bit more wiggle room when we're trying to drop it out there, as I know it's pretty tight between the engine and the subframe, because we're gonna leave the subframe in. We're gonna do it on jack stands, so make it nice and simple and easy to do at home. Okay, I just thought I would mention, so to get that def injector off, as I said, is an inverted Torx. So that's an E8 bit if you don't have one. I got that pulled over just out of the way. The def line itself, you just pinch the two tabs together, it pops off nice. And you can kind of see all the baked in def inside of there. And if you look, you kind of go down and in, you can see the DPF, the back side of the DPF, which should be clean. I'm going to leave these coolant lines on until I drain the coolant from underneath. So that's just going to chill there for a bit. So now we'll get these differential sensors off. So I'll probably just undo the rubber clamps down here and then just unplug them and get that up out of the way. Okay, so we got the differential sensors out of there. So in my timing belt video that I did on the EA288 on the CVCA, I mentioned being extremely careful with these because they're extremely common to see melted. And what happens is it's always after timing belt, and it's people getting too aggressive trying to move these lines, and they break this just like that, and then this is sealed up like that. So you have exhaust gases going up these tubes to these pressure sensors, and when they break like that, exhaust gas, hot exhaust gas, gets dumped all over here. This is covered like a baked potato, and it just melts these sensors, and then your wiring as well gets all melted. So just be extremely careful if you're reinstalling that stuff not to get too aggressive. Up next, we're going to do some sensors. I already know some people are going to be watching this video to fix the emissions components, and some are going to be watching this to delete it, so I'm not going to tell you what's right or wrong, but we're going to go over what these sensors do, what we need and what we don't need. So if you're reinstalling all of your components, make sure you mark where each component is before you unplug it, because they can only get plugged into one connector, but they can get mixed up in the holes. So this black connector in this group of 4, which is differential, this is your turbo actuator, and then this is EGT1, so this is pre-turbo. So whether you're deleting your car or reinstalling everything back to how it goes, this stays connected. Don't touch this. So up next, we've got these two sensors here. So they look like O2 sensors, both of them. This front one runs over, kind of gets lost in the abyss, and then goes over to this big chunky guy over here. So this back one is a NOx sensor. So the way you know the difference between a NOx sensor and an O2 or lambda sensor is the O2 or lambda sensor just has a normal 6-pin connector at the end, like this. Whereas a NOx sensor has a little module, and then they use a special connector at the end that looks like this. So you need to make sure those go back in their original spots. So we're gonna get this unplugged, get it out of the way. We've got an EGT, this will be number 3. And it goes over It'll be into this bundle here. And then we've got EGT2, which is pointing back. So these are 22 mils. These will be, I think they're 17 mils. These lambda and NOx sensors, they work really good if you have a O2 sensor socket, which looks like this or like this. So I think this one's going to work best to kind of slip down in, so wiring feeds up through the center, and then you put your breaker bar on there to break it loose. Okay, so we're underneath, so filming quality might not be the greatest because we're doing it on jack stands, but we've got the CV axle out of here. You just unbolted at the transmission, and then I always pull the ball joint bolts, and then you can slide this away. Comes out real nice and easy. So looking underneath here, it's not going to be fun. So we've got this coolant pump that we're going to have to take this off because that goes to a hard line, which goes all the way around and over to the coolant line up here. So that's blocking the DPF here. And then we got a coolant line up here that goes to the EGR cooler. So we've got lots of coolant that we're going to be splashing everywhere. So I'm not looking forward to that. So we'll get this pump out of here. We'll get this hard line out of here. And then, yeah, we're going to have to figure out how to get this EGR cooler out. So I think that'll be the very next piece. And then the other thing, I guess, will be the remainder of the exhaust. There's a clamp here, and that goes out the back. So I'll probably pull that before I spill coolant all over myself. Okay, so working away underneath, we've got an exhaust flap and another NOx sensor. So up top here, I noticed when I was unplugging the NOx sensor for pre-DPF, we had this connector here in the main harness, which kind of teed into this main one that went over and down. So this harness goes to our NOx sensor underneath. So depending on how you're doing it, you could unplug it, take this whole harness out, and take that bottom NOx sensor out if you're deleting it. If not, there's a connector underneath. We'll jump down there now. So underneath, we got our exhaust flap that's underneath that silver heat protectant, and then our NOx sensor, which was just clipped into this base here. So this is that extra harness that I was talking about. Okay, so we got the tail section out of here. So V-bands are awesome until they're not. So this one was rusted on really bad, and the bolt broke as well. So to get these broken free, and they're clamped like that, a lot of times if you get in there with a pry bar and you can pop these 3 sections loose, you can also get in there with a hammer if you can reach it and knock one side or the other side. It just needs a bit of a hit and then they come loose. Just so your 2 bolts on the subframe. The NOx sensor base came with it, and then I undid the flap there. And then the very end, the band clamp. These are really nice band clamps until they're not. I don't think you'd be able to get those undone even if you tried. So just a quick little cut. And then a 2.5-inch band clamp. If you take this inner sleeve out of here, a 2.5-inch band clamp should fit over top for reassembly. That way you don't have to buy the fancy Volkswagen parts. So that's for reassembly. But let's go back under, and we're covered in coolant now and get some hoses off here. Okay, so underneath here we've got this heat shield out with a bunch of just triple squares. The coolant pump, which was in and around there as well, just a single triple square. It bolted into the coolant line there. The plug is on the top side. It's kind of hard to see, but you've got this gray connector or gray lock. You have to slide back, and then you can push on it to unlock. So I unbolted the pump so I could flip it upside down to see what I was actually doing to get it unclipped. But next we're going to get this hard line out of here. So that is teed into our heater. Oh, I just got dirt in my eyes. That's teed into the heater core line. So we'll get that right out of there. And then to the bottom and to the head there, we've got our EGR cooler line. And then above all of this mess, we have another line that goes from the heater core to the top of that EGR cooler, which is going to be a pain. So we've got a bunch of these clamps in bad spots. And I think I'm going to be taking a bath in coolant here yet, but I'll probably put a plug on the coolant hose, get this kind of pulled over out of the way, and then move my coolant jug to where I am at right now, and hopefully it just drops straight down. Then I'll lay on the ground over here. So I know whoever put this together on the factory line must have been laughing. So the T we're looking at from underneath is, you can just see my finger here. And both of these constant tension clamps are on the top side. And it's pretty tight to the firewall. Like that's. So I've got the Knepex Twisty Boys, the regular boys, and I've also got some Snap-on cable end pliers. None of them are going to fit in there. So I'm going to take this bottom fitting off of the heater core and kind of bend it and twist it down, and I hope I can kind of get in there and get that clamp undone. So that's going to be the bottom one with the T, and then the top one going into the top of the EGR cooler is this top heater core line. And judging by that, from what I can feel, I think if I get this bottom heater core line out of the way, I should be able to get at that with some pliers from underneath and be fine. That's the plan of attack. Hopefully I don't get coolant absolutely everywhere. So I did the bottom EGR cooler line, and that hits the subframe and goes everywhere. I think my coolant bath is just beginning. Okay, now for the fun part of the EGR cooler. So we've got this V-band clamp. I assume it's probably a 5mm Allen at the top side. We have an electrical connector right here that's in behind like the tinfoil stuff. So I've already have that unplugged and pulled up to the top. The coolant line's already all off. And then the fun parts. So we have the pipe that goes up to the inlet of the turbo on the back side here. It looks like two T30s, I think, should bolt like a little flange into the inlet. And then the worst part is going to be this cooler to block bolt. So it looks like there's a mount goes this way with a bolt like that. The issue is you can't get on the bolt because of the hard lines for the coolant lines, but there is an L bracket by what it looks like that goes to the block. So I'll jump in a better picture of what this cooler looks like once I have it on the floor here. But I think I took the turbo inlet off the top side. I found where the bolt was. I've got my 10mm triple square on there. So I'm going to put an extension on here and work from underneath with a ratchet and hopefully get that loosened off. Okay, so we've got the EGR unbolted from the V-band, but it can't come out because it's recessed into the DPF. So we have to get the DPF slid over to get the cooler out, to get the DPF out. So to get the DPF slid over, we've got the V-band up here. We've got this one bolt here, and then we'll go underneath. So this is what I mean by it's recessed in a little bit. You can see all the oil and stuff coming out of it. I just can't get it over far enough, so we're gonna get the DPF slid over. So we've got this mount on this side. We've got 2 bolts here, 2 bolts here that go into the block, and then 2 bolts from the DPF into that mount. This whole mount would get out of the way. And then this cast piece, I believe it's like a C shape around the DPF. So we're gonna have this really rusty bolt here. I imagine on the top side of this outlet there'll be one there as well. And then I hope we can get that shimmied over far enough. So I'll undo that and see how we end up. Okay, so DPF's unbolted. I got it kind of all cockeyed against some AC lines and the ABS module over here. And there's still not enough room to get the cooler out. It's loose and it looks like it's pretty well there, but not quite. So I think it's time to swing the engine away. So we're gonna undo these 2 dog bone bolts and then pry off the subframe, pull it ahead, and probably shove a block in there or something just to kind of hold everything ahead and give us a little bit more room, because we have a fair bit of room up here yet to make up for back here. And I don't think the DPF and SCR are going to fit out of here without making a little bit more room. So just like that, the cooler is out of here. So I took it out the back of the tunnel. Should get some coolant on there. So I took it out the trans tunnel, so it kind of took a few tries to kind of twist and turn. It definitely didn't help having the turbo inlet pipe on still, but it came out nice and easy. So there's a brown or orange EGT sensor. Gotta make sure you unplug it. And its home was right back in here to this one. So Quick and easy. So now it's time for the DPF. So I'm hoping I've got it pulled far enough ahead. My little triangle block in there. We got to take this cast mount off, which looks like it's just 3 M10 triple squares, and then down it comes, I think. Okay, so I pretty well have the DPF out right now. It is jammed on the oil pan here, so I want to rotate the engine away just a little bit more, and then I should be home free. So I'm going to do that now before I do any damage to the plastic oil pan. So I'm going to get my pry bar in there, pull ahead a little bit, and then this should drop, and I'll do a recap at the end here. Okay, so this cast piece that we had to unbolt with the broken bolt down there, it had one bolt up top here at 2 that goes onto the turbo, so that was easy to get unbolted. You're going to need a pretty shallow M10 triple square, or M12, sorry. I have 1/2-inch drive stuff, and it just would not fit between the DPF sitting right here and the bolt head, so it needed to be a pretty stubby one to fit in there. But then it kind of makes it a bit of a pain because then you have the balance shaft cut out right underneath. So yeah, it's a bit of a pain, but we got that unbolted. This came down nicely with the engine still rotated ahead. This came down, flopped down nicely, and then the outlet really rubs pretty hard on the subframe, and there's an indent that comes out on the block that it hits kind of right into here pretty good. So pried the transmission farther ahead yet and got in there with the pry bar and kind of got it away from the block, and yeah, just lots of pry bars, kind of got it down, and then once this kind of dropped down far enough, it was just kind of home free. It just fell out of there nice and easy. So yeah, overall kind of sucks. It's yeah, the EGR cooler is a lot of work to get it on there. It seemed like every clamp or bolt that I needed, it was facing something that was in the way, and it just, yeah, it did not want to work very well. So we're going to reassemble some of this back together just for temporary, and then send the stuff out for repair. Okay, so we're going to get this bolted back up in there because this top mount is part of the turbo brace. So we don't want the turbo moving around, so we'll get that bolted back in there. The other thing is the EGR inlet. We don't want dust or dirt, anything like that in there. So I took this pipe off here. Real nice aluminum cap, fits in there. We'll bolt that back on. And then these 2 coolant lines, don't want coolant getting out, so we got a nice little T. 90 degree will pop in there. So we'll get all that wrapped up here first, and then carry on to the coolant T. Okay, so underneath here, we've got this nice little coolant bypass in here, just to keep all the coolant in. It would bolt to where the DPF was, on that bottom one, and then it goes to here where your 2 connect for your water pump. So nice and simple, keep all the coolant in. So that's all that we need down on this side. Then we'll go to the top side here. So the last piece to the puzzle, or second last piece, will be the DEF injector. These are 2 coolant lines that run across the front of the timing belt to the front of the engine here. So you got one connection right here, and there's one kind of in behind there in a less than fun spot. I believe these are 5/16, so my plan is just to make a little loop. And then we can have this sitting on the ground nice and safe. Okay, so the last piece of the puzzle is going to be these electrical connectors, because you don't want corrosion getting into these pins for reassembly, because you're going to have issues. So I make kits already for the CJAA and CKRA. They're just little 3D printed little bits. So we have 4 2-pins. So that'll go into your 3 EGT sensors here. The 4th 2-pin will go into the EGR temperature. And then we have 2 3-pins. That's going to go into our differential sensors. Nice and easy. We've got 2, I don't know, I call them 5 pins. So that'll be the EGR valve and the exhaust flap underneath that connector down there.
And then the last two will be, they're 5-pin, I just call them Knox connectors. So depending on how you do that, you'll have one connector here, and then you'll have the one underneath the car, or if you remove this harness, you only have the one up here. So that's nice and easy. It uses all the same connectors as the CJAAs and the CKRAs, except for the DEF injector. So these are all male dummy plugs because they go inside of the female. That's just kind of anatomy 101. If I can do it one-handed here, just like that. So this one, this is part of the harness here, so that's going to be a female, or this is going to be the male connector, so I need to make a female dummy plug. I'm just not sure ABS is strong enough or flexible enough to make this lock. So I'm going to try making a prototype tonight, see if I can get something to lock onto there.
Okay, so I made two different revisions of the female plugs, so if you want those electrical plugs, I'll put a link to a video in the description. You can watch a quick video on where to buy them. So it is what it is. The 2015s are a lot less fun to work on versus the 09s to 14s. So Volkswagen obviously made it as a engine that was going to be from their 2015 to current TDIs if they didn't run into their emission issues. It kind of ended the TDIs here in North America. So they definitely, they're a lot more compact, a lot more stuff going on. It doesn't seem to matter if it's emissions components, timing belt, or just anything on the engine. It's just a lot more stuff going on. So removing the components for repair is no different. It is a lot less fun. So I'm gonna end this video here, and thanks for watching.